This video is about the balance between light and darkness in our mentality and in our life. The assertion is that there has to be a balance between light and darkness to create a life as a perfect piece of art. So we look at life as a piece of art and we look into how many details it has of light and darkness. So we know the darkness of life is wars, anger, and suffering, but how will this darkness be useful in a life with balance between light and darkness? What role will darkness play in a balanced life? How do we recognize it? And what is it if it's not war, anger, suffering, and so forth? It is not the plan that we should keep on experiencing suffering and unpleasantness in our life. It will stop eventually. And what then? What will happen to the darkness? This video goes into what role our current experience of darkness will play in the future, where we don't have to experience darkness directly anymore. And before we start the bulk of the video, if you find the video valuable in any way, please like it and subscribe to the channel if you want to follow the channel in the future. It really helps the channel a lot. Thank you. So let's get started. Today, we as humans are not perfect yet. The harmony between light and darkness in us will be better as we get more experience and knowledge about the light and the darkness. I should also say that light and darkness are just not physical phenomena. It's also a mental thing. We know darkness as hate, bitterness, and so forth, and experiences as wars, violence, and those things we know quite well, on the unpleasant thing in our life. It is less obvious that too much light can be a problem as well, but it is. You can't be too kind. For instance, an example is if you let children do whatever they want. Those children will be a problem because they don't have boundaries. The parents who let their children do what they want are doing these children a disservice. It is not a perfect piece of art that you are living in that case. This does not only happen to children. The same goes for adults, where we are too kind to someone, which causes trouble for them as well. That could be lack of boundaries, or we let people get away with things that they really shouldn't get away with. And I'm not saying that we should, after people or anything, we should just set some boundaries, and you can definitely do that in a kind and loving way. Sometimes you need to push back on people with bad behaviors. For instance, you might not help addicts by letting them go all out on their abuse. There has to be a structure that might be unpleasant in the short term, but is the best help in the long run or in the long term. It is a delicate balance between setting boundaries and still being helpful. But letting go is not logical or helpful in many cases. When we are letting go, that is when there is too much light. You become too helpful and kind of foolish. Foolish because the action literally lacks intelligence and logic, because its long-term effect is not a blessing for whoever is at the receiving end of it. What I want to talk about in this video is what will happen with the dark side of us when we evolve into real human beings. As of now, most of it comes out in a bad way with the wars, the hate, and plain unfriendliness. What does this darkness need to turn into in order to make a harmony between light and darkness? Because the idea here is not that darkness will go away, but it needs to have a role that does not lead to these bad things I just mentioned. So what role will darkness play in the future? Martinus, Danish author, states that through our experience with darkness, we will gain knowledge about it. We'll learn how to use the darkness to create our life into a blessing for our surroundings. But we need the knowledge about the darkness to give the light in our life details. Light in itself is insufficient. I made a video about this where I used the sun as an example, where there's so much light that there are no details. And we also have the other side of it, where we had the earth in its early days, where it was all darkness, and that also lacked details. And the idea is that when you blend the two, the darkness and the light, colors shows up. And the colors are more loving, more a blessing than the pure light and the pure darkness. We need the colors in between. So with the knowledge about darkness, the former darkness with hate transform into the creation of a balance between light and darkness. We generally start creating something that has the balance between light and darkness. Whereas now we are sometimes using too much light and sometimes too much darkness. We know the darkness part quite well, and the light part of it is something many people know about, but having it as a general thing, as I'm telling right now, is not so well known. So the knowledge about the darkness will enable us to steer the light into a path that creates a blessing for other living beings, and not the suffering that we still experience today. We learn how to live our lives as a perfect piece of art, with all the colors, where light and darkness is in a balance. Not because we're experts in the light side of life, but because we are experts in both the light and dark side of life. We know how to live a life that leads away from the hate. We'll be able to create a harmony between light and darkness. Create an image in life, plenty of details, where there's not too much light and not too much darkness. This transforms the way the darkness is in our life from an unpleasant experience to a lovely experience. But we need the knowledge about darkness to create light that is details. That makes the light of the sun into a beautiful picture that we find on the surface of Earth today. In an earlier video, we had the example of the sun that is without many details. That is the light without darkness. We also found planets in the outer part of the solar system that is in the darkness. That would be darkness without light. In the middle of this, we find Earth with plenty of details and colors. That is what our life is becoming, both on the physical plane and on the mental side of things. The mental side of us modern humans are still with quite large quantum of darkness. The dark side of us will be turned into knowledge about darkness. This knowledge will be used to create a harmony between the light and dark. So life will become a colorful thing and a blessing. Therefore, the next step in our development is to turn the dark side of us into knowledge about it and use it to do good things instead of bad things, so to speak. The situation with too much light will also have to be turned into a creation with the right balance between light and darkness. This will obviously also be part of the development that we need to go through and learn about. There are many people who believe that war is sort of a given. We cannot have a life without wars, hate, and all those kind of things. Of course, if you believe that, it's really easy to just stick to that and go on with that. So the whole idea with the work of Martinus is to show that the path forward is actually to go away with that version of darkness. A darkness that is actually pretty bad. It hurts people, but from these experiences that we get from the darkness, we will also learn. Martinus also talk about reincarnation, and that the experience that we gain will actually add to our talents. So eventually we'll learn what is right and wrong. And that's where we know how to use darkness in a proper way, at least seen from a perspective of that being a blessing for us. So with that said, I will say thanks for watching the video. Just wanted to talk about what happens to the darkness in our life. State that it won't go away, but will have a very different role in our future and become knowledge that we can use to manifest a life that is a detailed piece of art and a blessing for other living beings. Right now, our manifestation is kind of a piece of art, but it can be pretty light sometimes, or too light, and it can be too dark sometimes. And that creates unpleasantness. But that's only temporary. We will eventually learn. That's the message from Martinus. So now there's only to restate that if you found the video valuable, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps. And leave questions or comment below. I will be happy to answer. And thanks for watching.